The autumn wind carried whispers of scorn as Olivia Blackwood stood frozen in the center of Redemption Springs, a town that had once felt like home but now seemed like a pit of vipers. The jeers and pointing fingers of townsfolk felt like physical blows as she clutched her shawl tighter around her shoulders, her unmarried state and swollen belly the cause of their collective disdain. "Whore!" someone shouted from the gathering crowd. "Disgrace!" called another. Olivia kept her chin up, despite the tears threatening to spill. At 22, she had never imagined her life would come to this, publicly shamed. Her father dead from consumption just 3 months prior, and carrying the child of a man who had promised marriage only to disappear with the spring cattle drive. Her honey-brown hair, once neatly pinned, now fell in loose strands around her face as she tried to make her way to the general store for supplies she desperately needed. "We don't serve your kind here." Mr. Watkins, the store owner, blocked the entrance with his considerable frame. "Find somewhere else to shop, Miss Blackwood. Your money ain't welcome no more." Olivia felt the blood drain from her face. "Please, Mr. Watkins, I've known you since I was a child." "I just need some flour and should have thought about that before you went and disgraced yourself," he interrupted, crossing his arms. "What would your poor father say if he could see you now?" The mention of her father was like a knife to her heart. Judge Thomas Blackwood had been respected throughout the territory, a man of unwavering principles who had raised his daughter alone after her mother's death. Now, his memory was tarnished by her circumstance. As the crowd grew, Olivia became increasingly aware of how dangerous her position was becoming. Women whispered behind gloved hands while men stared with mixtures of disgust and something more predatory. She backed away, clutching her small purse, wondering how she would survive when the entire town had turned against her. "That's enough." The deep voice cut through the murmuring crowd like a whip crack. The sea of people parted, revealing a tall figure striding purposefully toward the scene. Elijah Remington, owner of the Double R Ranch and one of the most successful cattle barons in the territory, moved with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to commanding respect. His dark brown hat shadowed piercing blue eyes, and a week's worth of stubble covered his sun-weathered face. At 34, Elijah was known as a fair but formidable man who kept to himself, rarely venturing into town except for business. Stories about his past varied. Some said he'd been a gunslinger before settling in Redemption Springs 6 years ago. Others claimed he'd fought in the war. All anyone knew for certain was that he'd built his ranch from nothing into one of the most prosperous in the territory. "Last I checked," Elijah said, his voice carrying across the now silent street, "this was a civilized town. Doesn't look very civilized from where I'm standing." Sheriff Miller stepped forward, adjusting his belt awkwardly. "Now, Remington, this ain't your concern. The lady here has brought shame." Elijah cut him off. "I see only one shameful thing here, and it's not the woman." His gaze swept the crowd, challenging anyone to speak against him. Few in town were willing to cross a man of his standing, especially one rumored to be as deadly with a gun as he was with business dealings. Olivia stared at him in confusion. She'd seen Elijah Remington from a distance over the years, but had never exchanged more than a polite nod with the man. Why would he, of all people, come to her defense? He turned to her then, his expression softening slightly. "Miss Blackwood, I believe," she nodded, unable to find her voice. "I understand you're in need of supplies." It wasn't a question. "Yes, but as you can see, I'm not welcome here anymore," she managed, hating how her voice trembled. Something flashed in his eyes, anger perhaps, though not directed at her. He removed his hat in a gesture of respect that shocked the onlookers. "I have a proposition for you, Miss Blackwood." The crowd grew quiet, straining to hear. "These good people," he said the word with unmistakable sarcasm, seem concerned about propriety. Perhaps we can address that concern directly." He stepped closer to her. "Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Gasps rippled through the crowd. Olivia herself felt lightheaded with shock. "Mr. Remington, you cannot be serious." "I'm rarely anything but serious, Miss Blackwood." His voice had dropped so only she could hear him. "I'm offering you protection and a name for your child. You'd want for nothing at the Double R." "But you don't know me," she whispered desperately. "Why would you do this?" Something haunted passed behind his eyes. "Let's just say I understand what it means to be judged unfairly." He raised his voice again for all to hear. "What say you, Miss Blackwood? Will you marry me right here and now, or would you prefer to continue facing this town's hospitality alone?" Olivia's mind raced. She had no illusions about what awaited her as an unmarried mother, destitution at best, prostitution at worst. Her father's house was being seized for debts, and no one would hire her in her condition. Elijah Remington was offering her and her unborn child a future. "Why here? Why now?" she asked quietly. His mouth quirked in what might have been the ghost of a smile. "So no one can claim it didn't happen. So everyone can witness that you're under my protection from this moment forward." The logic was undeniable, even if his motivation remained mysterious. Olivia took a deep breath and nodded. "Yes, Mr. Remington, I accept your proposal." A murmur of disbelief spread through the crowd. Elijah turned to face them, his expression challenging anyone to object. "Reverend Parker," he called out, spotting the minister near the back of the gathering. "I believe your services are required." The Reverend, a thin man with spectacles perched on his nose, looked uncomfortable but stepped forward nonetheless. "Mr. Remington, surely this is hasty. The banns should be read, preparations made. The only preparation needed is your Bible, Reverend," Elijah interrupted. "Unless you're refusing to perform your duty." The implied threat was clear. The Reverend sighed and retrieved a small Bible from his pocket. "Very well, if the couple would join hands." Elijah held out his hand to Olivia. She hesitated only a moment before placing her trembling fingers in his calloused palm. His hand was warm and steady, engulfing hers completely. As the Reverend began the ceremony, Olivia felt as though she were watching herself from a distance. Just that morning, she had awakened alone and afraid, facing eviction and starvation. Now she was marrying a virtual stranger in the middle of the street, before the very people who had mocked and shunned her moments ago. "Do you, Elijah James Remington, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" the Reverend asked, his tone making clear his disapproval. "I do," Elijah replied without hesitation, his gaze never leaving Olivia's face. "And do you, Olivia Grace Blackwood, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Olivia swallowed hard. "I do." "Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife." The Reverend closed his Bible with a snap. "You may kiss the bride," he added reluctantly. Elijah looked at Olivia questioningly, giving her the chance to refuse. Instead, she nodded slightly, understanding that this final act would seal their arrangement in the eyes of the town. He leaned down and pressed his lips to hers in a brief, gentle kiss that nonetheless sent an unexpected warmth through her body. When they parted, he turned to face the stunned onlookers. "Mrs. Remington will now be completing her shopping. I trust there will be no further difficulties." The words hung in the air like a physical threat. Mr. Watkins, looking pale, hurriedly stepped aside from the store entrance. "Of course, Mr. Remington. Mrs. Remington is most welcome," Elijah nodded. "I'll fetch the wagon and meet you here shortly. Take your time, wife." The last word seemed to startle him as much as it did her, but he recovered quickly, squeezing her hand once before releasing it. As he strode away, Olivia stood frozen for a moment, stunned by the turn of events. Then, gathering her courage, She entered the general store, acutely aware of the stares following her. The whispers had changed tenor from condemnation to disbelief and speculation about what had just transpired. Mrs. Peterson, the banker's wife who had been particularly vocal about Olivia's disgrace, approached her as she selected flour from the shelf. "Well," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "that was quite the performance. One wonders what Mr. Remington stands to gain from such an arrangement." Olivia straightened her spine. "My husband's motivations are not your concern, Mrs. Peterson." The word husband felt foreign on her tongue, but she saw the impact it had. Mrs. Peterson's mouth tightened into a thin line. "Perhaps not, but mark my words, a marriage built on convenience rather than affection rarely prospers. I give it 6 months before he tires of his charity case." Olivia fought the urge to flinch. Instead, she smiled coolly. "How fortunate that I didn't ask for your prediction. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have shopping to complete." She turned away, heart pounding, and continued selecting the items she needed. By the time Elijah returned, she had filled a basket with essentials: flour, sugar, coffee, beans, and a few small luxuries she hadn't been able to afford since her father's death. Elijah entered the store, hat in hand, and approached the counter where Mr. Watkins was totaling her purchases. "Add these to the order," he said, placing a bolt of soft blue fabric and several packets of sewing notions beside her items. When Olivia looked at him questioningly, he shrugged. "Thought you might need it." The simple gesture, his consideration for needs she hadn't voiced, brought unexpected tears to her eyes. She blinked them away quickly, unwilling to show weakness in front of the still watching townsfolk. After paying for their purchases, Elijah carried the packages to a well-maintained wagon hitched to 2 strong horses. He helped Olivia up to the seat with careful hands, then loaded their supplies in the back before climbing up beside her. As they drove away from Redemption Springs, Olivia felt the weight of the town's stares on her back, but also a strange lightness. Whatever lay ahead at the Double R Ranch, it had to be better than what she was leaving behind. They traveled in silence for several miles, the only sounds the creak of the wagon wheels and the steady clop of the horses' hooves on the dusty road. Finally, Elijah cleared his throat. "I imagine you have questions," he said, eyes fixed on the horizon. Olivia studied his profile, the strong jaw, the lines at the corners of his eyes that spoke of years squinting against the sun. "Several," she admitted. "Though I hardly know where to begin," he nodded. "Fair enough. Let me start by saying I don't expect anything from you that you're not willing to give. This marriage is for your protection and for the child's. You'll have your own room at the ranch, and your privacy will be respected." Relief and something like disappointment mingled in her chest. "I appreciate your clarification, Mr. Remington." "Elijah," he corrected gently. "Seems we should use first names, being married and all." "Elijah," she repeated, testing the name. "I'm Olivia, though I suppose you already knew that." "Judge Blackwood spoke of you often," he said, surprising her. "He was proud of you. Mentioned how you kept his house running after your mother passed, how you had a way with figures and helped him organize his affairs." Tears stung her eyes at the mention of her father. "You knew him well, well enough. He was a fair man. Helped me settle some land disputes when I first came to these parts." Elijah's expression softened momentarily. "He didn't deserve to die the way he did, wasting away like that." "No, he didn't," Olivia agreed quietly. A thought occurred to her. "Is that why you helped me? Because of my father?" Elijah was silent for so long she thought he might not answer. "Partly," he finally admitted, "but mostly because what that town was doing wasn't right. A woman in your condition needs support, not scorn." "And what about the father of my child?" she asked boldly. "Aren't you curious?" His hands tightened on the reins. "Your past is your own, Olivia. I won't pry where I'm not invited." His restraint surprised her. Most men would have demanded details, claimed ownership of her secrets along with her hand. His name was James Thornton, she found herself saying. He worked for the stage company, said he loved me, promised marriage, then disappeared when the spring came. I later heard he'd taken a job with a company further west. Did he know about the child? No, I didn't know myself until after he'd gone. She stared down at her hands. I wrote to him when I found out. The letter came back unopened. Elijah nodded, his expression unreadable. Some men don't deserve the title. They fell into silence again as the landscape changed from rolling prairie to more rugged terrain. In the distance, Olivia could see mountains etched against the sky, their peaks still capped with snow despite the September warmth. After another hour's travel, Elijah pointed ahead. There it is, Double R Ranch. Olivia leaned forward, taking in the sprawling property that would now be her home. A large two-story house of weathered wood with a wide porch stood on a gentle rise, surrounded by several outbuildings and corrals. Beyond, she could see vast pastures where cattle grazed. Unlike many ranches she'd seen, this one had flourishing gardens and trees planted around the main house, creating an oasis in the otherwise open landscape. "It's beautiful," she said honestly. Something like pride flickered across his face. "It's taken work, but it's coming along." As they approached, several ranch hands stopped their tasks to watch the wagon's arrival. Olivia felt their curious gazes and instinctively placed a protective hand over her belly, which was visible beneath her worn dress. Elijah seemed to sense her discomfort. "Don't worry about the men. They work for me, and they'll treat you with respect or answer to me." The wagon rolled to a stop before the house, and a woman emerged from the front door. Short and sturdy with gray-streaked black hair pulled into a severe bun, she wiped her hands on her apron as she came down the steps. "Mrs. Winters," Elijah called in greeting as he set the brake. "I've brought someone for you to meet." The woman's sharp eyes took in Olivia's condition with a single glance, but her expression remained neutral. "So I see." Elijah jumped down from the wagon and came around to help Olivia descend. "This is Olivia Blackwood, that is, Olivia Remington, my wife." Mrs. Winters's eyebrows shot up, the only indication of her surprise. "Is that so? Well, welcome to Double R, Mrs. Remington. I'm Martha Winters, housekeeper and cook." "Thank you," Olivia said, uncertain of her reception. "Mrs. Winters has been with me since I established the ranch," Elijah explained. "She runs the household and keeps us all in line." The older woman snorted. "Try as I might." She gestured to the house. "Come inside, Mrs. Remington. You look like you could use some tea and a rest after your journey." Olivia nodded gratefully, suddenly aware of how tired she felt. The emotional turmoil of the day combined with the physical strain of pregnancy had left her exhausted. "I'll bring in your things," Elijah said. "Go on with Mrs. Winters." Inside, the house was surprisingly comfortable, a blend of practical frontier functionality and touches of refinement. The main room held sturdy furniture arranged around a stone fireplace, with bookshelves lining one wall. Clean curtains hung at the windows, and a colorful rug covered part of the wooden floor. "This way," Mrs. Winters said, leading her up a staircase to the second floor. "Mr. Remington had me prepare the blue room for you. It has the morning sun, which is pleasant this time of year." She opened a door to reveal a spacious bedroom painted a soft blue, with a large four-poster bed, a dresser, washstand, and a comfortable-looking chair near the window. It was the finest room Olivia had ever been offered. "The master bedroom is across the hall, Mrs. Winters said, watching Olivia carefully. "Though I gather from your husband's instructions that you'll be keeping separate quarters for now." Olivia felt a blush creep up her neck. "Yes, that's the arrangement." Mrs. Winters nodded, seeming satisfied with the answer. "Well, There's a washroom at the end of the hall with a proper bathtub. Hot water is no trouble, we've got a good system here. I'll have some sent up for you to freshen up before dinner." She paused. "And I'll have some tea brought up now. You look dead on your feet, if you don't mind my saying so." "I don't mind," Olivia said with a tired smile. "It's been a complicated day." The older woman's expression softened slightly. "I imagine it has. Rest now. Dinner's at 6, but if you're too tired, I can have a tray sent up." "Thank you, Mrs. Winters. I appreciate your kindness." Left alone, Olivia sank onto the edge of the bed, running her hand over the clean quilt. The events of the day felt like a dream or perhaps a story from one of her father's books. This morning, she had been Olivia Blackwood, disgraced daughter of the late judge, facing destitution and shame. Now she was Olivia Remington, wife of one of the territory's most successful ranchers, sitting in a beautiful bedroom that was apparently hers. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called. Elijah entered, carrying her small carpet bag and the packages from the general store. He set them down carefully near the dresser. "Mrs. Winters will be up shortly with your tea. Is the room to your liking?" "It's lovely," she said honestly. "Far nicer than I expected." He seemed pleased with her response. "Good, I had the room prepared a few days ago, after I heard about your situation in town." Olivia blinked in surprise. "You planned this? Before today?" Elijah shifted uncomfortably. "Not exactly. I considered offering help of some kind." The marriage was improvised. She couldn't help the small laugh that escaped her. Improvised. That's one way to describe it. He smiled then, a genuine expression that transformed his serious face. "I've been called many things in my life, but impulsive isn't usually one of them." Their eyes met, and for a moment, Olivia felt something pass between them, a shared understanding, perhaps, or the beginning of a tentative friendship. The moment was broken by another knock as Mrs. Winters arrived with a tea tray. Elijah stepped back, his expression becoming unreadable once more. "I'll leave you to rest," he said. "We can talk more at dinner if you're feeling up to joining me." After he left, Olivia accepted the tea gratefully and sank back against the pillows. As the warm liquid soothed her throat, she gazed around the room that was now hers and wondered what strange twist of fate had brought her here, and what the future would hold with the enigmatic man who was now her husband. The warm bath Mrs. Winters had arranged was like heaven after the strain of the day. Olivia sank into the copper tub, letting the scented water ease her aching back and wash away the dust of travel. As she bathed, she allowed herself to truly process everything that had happened. She had a husband, now a virtual stranger, who had swooped in like a character from a dime novel to rescue her from public humiliation. Why had he done it? His explanation about respecting her father seemed insufficient for such a drastic action. And what kind of marriage would this be? He'd promised separate rooms and privacy, which was both a relief and, strangely, a bit disappointing. Olivia placed a hand on her rounded belly, feeling the flutter of movement within. "Well, little one," she whispered, "it seems we have a protector now. At least you'll have a name and a home." The baby kicked in response, as if approving of this new arrangement. After her bath, she dressed in the cleanest of her worn dresses, painfully aware of how shabby it looked in these elegant surroundings. The fabric was stretched tight across her growing belly, and the sleeves were frayed at the cuffs. She'd had no money for maternity clothes after her father's death, making do instead with letting out seams and wearing her dresses unlaced as much as possible. She was attempting to tame her hair into a respectable style when another knock came at her door. Mrs. Winters entered carrying a large box. "Mr. Remington asked me to bring this up," she said, placing it on the bed. "Said you might find it useful." Curious, Olivia opened the box to find several dresses clearly made for a woman in her condition. The garments were simple but well made, in practical colors of blue, brown, and green. These were Mrs. Remington's, the first Mrs. Remington. That is, Mrs. Winters explained, seeing Olivia's confused expression. Elijah was married before, Olivia asked, surprised. Mrs. Winters nodded, her expression careful. Yes, to Rebecca. She passed nearly 4 years ago now, childbed fever. Olivia's hand went instinctively to her belly, a chill running through her despite the warm room. Childbed fever was the terror of every expectant mother. A seemingly healthy woman could deliver a perfect baby, only to burn with fever days later and be dead within a week. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I didn't know. Not many do. He doesn't speak of it." Mrs. Winters began unpacking the dresses, shaking them out with practiced movements. "These have been packed away since then. He must have remembered them when he learned of your condition." Olivia ran her fingers over the soft fabric of a blue dress. The thought of wearing a dead woman's clothes, the clothes of Elijah's first wife, was unsettling, but she was in no position to refuse. Her own garments were falling apart, and the material Elijah had purchased at the store would take time to fashion into new dresses. Was Rebecca from around here? Olivia asked, unable to contain her curiosity. Mrs. Winters' hand stilled for a moment. "No, Mr. Remington brought her from back east when he settled here. She was a city girl, unused to ranch life, but she tried her best." A fond smile softened the housekeeper's face. "Planted those gardens, you might have noticed said if she had to live in the wilderness, she'd at least have flowers to look at." "And the child, a little boy, didn't survive his mother by more than a day." Mrs. Winters crossed herself. "Mr. Remington buried them together under the big oak tree behind the house." Olivia's heart ached for the man who had married her that afternoon. No wonder he'd been so understanding of her plight. He knew firsthand the dangers facing a woman bringing new life into the world. "Thank you for telling me," she said softly. "I'll try not to mention it to him if it causes pain." Mrs. Winters nodded approvingly. "That would be best. Now, let's see if one of these dresses will do for dinner. The green one, I think it brings out your eyes." With the housekeeper's help, Olivia changed into the green dress. It fit remarkably well, needing only a slight adjustment at the shoulders. The fabric was of much better quality than anything she'd owned before, and the cut cleverly accommodated her pregnancy while still looking elegant. "There," Mrs. Winters said, stepping back to survey her work. "Much better. Mr. Remington will be pleased." Olivia wasn't sure why that thought sent a flutter through her stomach that had nothing to do with the baby. "I should thank him for his thoughtfulness." "Indeed you should. He's waiting in the dining room whenever you're ready." Taking a deep breath to calm her nerves, Olivia made her way downstairs. The house was larger than it had appeared from outside, with several rooms branching off from the main hallway. She followed the sound of movement to find a well-appointed dining room where Elijah stood at the window, gazing out at the darkening landscape. He'd changed for dinner, she noticed, into a clean shirt and dark trousers. His hair was damp, suggesting he too had bathed, and he'd trimmed his stubble to a neater line along his jaw. He turned at her entrance, and something in his expression made her heart skip. "The dress suits you," he said simply. "Thank you for thinking of it," she replied. "And for everything else today. I'm not sure how to repay such kindness." He shook his head. "There's nothing to repay. Please sit." He pulled out a chair for her at the table, which was set with good china and actual silver cutlery luxuries she hadn't seen since before her father's illness had consumed their savings. As they settled into their seats, Mrs. Winters and a young girl Olivia hadn't met began serving the meal, a hearty beef stew with fresh bread, followed by apple pie still warm from the oven. The food was simple but delicious, especially after months of increasingly meager meals as Olivia's funds dwindled. "This is wonderful," she said after her first few bites. "I haven't eaten so well in a long time." Elijah frowned slightly. "Were things that bad in town?" Olivia considered glossing over the truth, but decided honesty was the better course with this man who had risked so much for her. "After my father died, the medical bills and funeral costs took most of what we had. I found work sewing for a while, but when my condition became noticeable." She shrugged. "The respectable ladies of Redemption Springs suddenly had no need of my services." His jaw tightened. "And no one offered help. Judge Blackwood served that community for 15 years. There were a few kind gestures at first. Mrs. Miller, the sheriff's wife, brought food after the funeral. Reverend Parker offered prayers." She smiled bitterly. "But when news of my pregnancy spread, those same people couldn't distance themselves fast enough. Fallen women don't deserve Christian charity, apparently." "That's not true Christianity," Elijah said quietly. "Judge Blackwood taught me that justice without mercy is just another form of cruelty." Olivia looked at him with new interest. "You sound like you knew my father well. Better than most, perhaps." He took a sip of water, seeming to consider his next words carefully. "When I came to this territory, I was running from some things. Your father saw through me right away but gave me a chance anyway. Said everyone deserves the opportunity to build something better than what they're leaving behind." "That sounds like him," Olivia said softly. "He always believed in second chances. He was right to." Elijah gestured around them. "Everything here exists because he was willing to look past what others might have seen." Olivia sensed there was more to the story, some darkness in Elijah's past that he wasn't ready to share. Rather than press, she changed the subject. "Tell me about the ranch. It seems quite successful." Relief flickered in his eyes at the shift in conversation. "It's doing well. We run about 2,000 head of cattle, plus some horses I've been breeding. The western pastures have good water access year-round, which makes all the difference in this country." As he spoke about the ranch, his passion became evident. This wasn't merely a business to him, but a creation, something he'd built from nothing into a thriving enterprise. Olivia found herself genuinely interested, asking questions about the operation and offering observations that sometimes surprised him with their insight. "You know something about ranching?" he asked after she made a comment about cattle markets. "Not specifically, but business principles are similar regardless of the commodity," she explained. "My father let me keep his accounts and correspondence in his later years. I enjoyed the work." Elijah studied her with new appreciation. "Would you be interested in looking over the ranch books? Mrs. Winters has been keeping them, but she'd be the first to tell you it's not her strength." The offer startled her. Most men wouldn't consider allowing their wives near their business affairs, let alone invite their participation. "I'd like that very much if you're serious." "I am. This place is your home now, which makes it partly your business too." Home. The word resonated within her. Despite the strangeness of her circumstances, Olivia realized she already felt safer here than she had in months. As the meal concluded, Elijah cleared his throat. "There's something else we should discuss. Your things in town, furniture, personal items. I can send some men tomorrow to collect them if you'd like." Olivia's expression fell. "There's nothing to collect. After my father died, I had to sell most of our belongings to cover debts. What little I had left was in my carpet bag." The loss of her family home and its contents still stung. Each piece of furniture, each book, each memento had been a connection to her parents. Elijah's expression darkened. "I'm sorry, I didn't realize." "It's not your concern," she said quickly. "You've done more than enough already." "It is my concern now," he countered gently. "You're my wife, Olivia. That means your problems are mine to help solve." The simple declaration warmed her in unexpected ways. For months, she had faced her troubles alone, Each new difficulty another weighed on shoulders already struggling to bear the load. Now, suddenly, there was someone offering to share the burden. "Thank you," she whispered, unable to say more past the lump in her throat. Understanding seemed to pass between them, a recognition of the fragile trust beginning to form. Elijah nodded once, then rose from his seat. "It's been a long day, you should rest." "Yes, I think I will." Olivia stood, suddenly aware of how tired she truly was. The baby seemed to be pressing against every part of her from within, and her back ached from the day's strain. "I'll see you in the morning," Elijah said, walking her to the stairs. "Breakfast is usually at 7, but sleep as long as you need. Mrs. Winters will hold something for you." At the foot of the staircase, they paused, the awkwardness of their situation returning. Were they to kiss goodnight, shake hands, simply nod and part ways? Olivia solved the dilemma by offering her hand. "Good night, Elijah, and thank you again for everything today." He took her hand, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. "Good night, Olivia." For a moment, he seemed about to say something more, but instead, he simply released her hand and stepped back. As she climbed the stairs to her new bedroom, Olivia couldn't help wondering what life would bring in this strange marriage. Whatever happened, she was no longer alone, and for tonight, that was enough. The days at Double R Ranch fell into a rhythm that surprised Olivia with its comfortable predictability. Each morning, she would wake to sunlight streaming through her window and the sounds of the ranch already bustling with activity. After dressing in one of Rebecca's altered dresses, she would join Elijah for breakfast, where they would discuss the day ahead. True to his word, he had shown her the ranch accounts, and she quickly proved her skill with figures. Within a week, she had reorganized the haphazard bookkeeping system into something more efficient, earning Mrs. Winters' grudging approval and Elijah's open admiration. "I've never seen it so clear before," he commented one afternoon as they sat in his study, reviewing the quarterly profits. "You have a gift for this." Olivia smiled, pleased by the compliment. "It's just organization. Anyone could do it with a bit of training." "Not anyone," he countered. "I've tried making sense of these books myself and always end up with a headache for my troubles." They worked well together, she discovered. Elijah knew the practical aspects of ranching inside and out, while she brought order to the business side of the operation. Each evening at dinner, they would discuss the day's challenges and successes, forming a partnership that felt increasingly natural despite the unusual circumstances of their marriage. Yet for all their growing ease with one another, certain boundaries remained firmly in place. Elijah never entered her bedroom, and though his gaze sometimes lingered on her when he thought she wasn't looking, he made no move to change their arrangement. They shared meals, conversation, and occasionally a companionable silence by the fire in the evenings, but nothing more. Olivia told herself this was exactly what she wanted: safety and stability without the complications of a true marriage. But as October turned to November and the weather grew colder, she found herself wondering what it might be like to have more. Elijah was not what she had expected. Behind his reserved exterior was a thoughtful, intelligent man with a dry wit that often caught her by surprise. She enjoyed his company and found herself looking forward to their conversations. One crisp morning in late November, Olivia was reviewing supply orders in the study when a commotion outside drew her attention. Looking through the window, she saw a fancy carriage pulling up to the house, an unusual sight at the remote ranch. A woman descended, fashionably dressed in a burgundy traveling suit and matching hat with an ostrich feather. Mrs. Winters appeared in the doorway, looking flustered. "Mrs. Remington, there's a visitor. A Miss Harriet Caldwell from back east says she's here to see Mr. Remington." "Thank you, Mrs. Winters. Please show her into the parlor and offer refreshments. I'll join her immediately." Curious about this unexpected guest, Olivia made her way to the formal parlor, a room they rarely used. The visitor stood by the window, removing her gloves with practiced elegance. She was strikingly beautiful, with auburn hair arranged in an elaborate style and fine features that spoke of good breeding. "Miss Caldwell, I'm Olivia Remington. Welcome to Double R Ranch." The woman turned, surprise evident on her face as she took in Olivia's pregnant figure. "Mrs. Remington." I wasn't aware Elijah had remarried. The familiar use of Elijah's name raised Olivia's guard instantly. "Yes, though it's a recent development. May I ask your connection to my husband?" Miss Caldwell's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Elijah and I are old friends from Boston." Very old friends, one might say. I was Rebecca's cousin. Understanding dawned. This woman had known Elijah in his life before the ranch, the life he rarely discussed. "I see. I'm afraid Elijah is out with the men today, checking the north pasture. He won't return until evening. How disappointing." Miss Caldwell seated herself gracefully on the sofa. "Though perhaps fortunate, as it gives us a chance to become acquainted. I'm most curious about the woman who managed to capture Elijah's heart after my dear cousin's passing." There was a subtle emphasis on the word capture that Olivia didn't miss. This woman was not here for a friendly visit. "It's a rather private matter," Olivia replied carefully. "But I'm happy to offer you refreshment while you wait for his return. Or perhaps you'd prefer to come back tomorrow." "Oh, I'll wait," Miss Caldwell said with a smile that reminded Olivia of a cat spotting a mouse. "I've come all this way, after all, and I do so want to see Elijah's face when he finds me here." The implied intimacy in her tone set Olivia's teeth on edge. She forced a polite smile. "As you wish. Mrs. Winters can prepare a guest room if you intend to stay overnight." "How hospitable." Miss Caldwell's gaze swept over Olivia's form. "And when is the happy event expected? You look quite advanced." "January," Olivia answered, refusing to be baited by the woman's tone. "How interesting. A rather quick courtship then, or perhaps—" She left the insinuation hanging. Anger flared in Olivia's chest. "My husband and I may not have had a conventional courtship, Miss Caldwell, but our marriage is not subject to your speculation." The other woman laughed lightly. "My apologies, Mrs. Remington. I'm simply trying to understand. You see, the last letter I received from Elijah just 3 months ago made no mention of a new bride. Quite the contrary, in fact." Before Olivia could respond, the sound of boots in the hallway announced Elijah's arrival. He appeared in the doorway, his expression changing from curiosity to shock as he recognized the visitor. "Harriet," he said, his voice carefully neutral, "this is unexpected." Miss Caldwell rose, moving toward him with practiced grace. "Elijah, darling, aren't you pleased to see me?" His eyes flicked to Olivia, concern evident in his gaze. "What brings you all the way to Wyoming territory? Your letters stopped coming. I grew worried." She placed a gloved hand on his arm, and it seems with good reason. "I arrived to find you've acquired a pregnant wife without so much as a word to your friends back home." Elijah gently removed her hand. "My apologies for the lack of correspondence. As you can see, there have been significant changes in my circumstances. So I gather." Harriet's smile was brittle. "Though I confess, I'm having trouble reconciling the Elijah Remington. I know with a man who would marry a woman already carrying another man's child." The room went deadly silent. Olivia felt the blood drain from her face at the vicious accuracy of the barb. Elijah's expression hardened into something dangerous. "You forget yourself, Harriet," he said quietly. "You're speaking of my wife. Am I, or am I simply stating what everyone must be thinking?" She turned to Olivia with false sympathy. "My dear, did he tell you about our understanding?" "About his promise to return east once the ranch was established." Olivia looked to Elijah, whose face had gone pale. "There is no understanding, Harriet," he said firmly. There hasn't been for years, as I've made clear in my letters. Yet you continued to write, she countered. To seek my advice, to share your thoughts. What was I to think? That we were friends, nothing more. Elijah moved to stand beside Olivia, a gesture that didn't escape their visitor's notice. I apologize if I gave you false hope, but my life is here now, with Olivia. Harriet's composure cracked, just for a moment, revealing genuine hurt beneath the polished exterior. I see. Well, this has been illuminating, if not the reunion I anticipated. She gathered her things with quick, efficient movements. I'll find accommodations in town. No need to trouble your housekeeper with preparing a room. Harriet, Elijah began, but she cut him off with a raised hand. Please don't. I've embarrassed myself quite enough for one day. She straightened her shoulders, dignity reasserting itself. Mrs. Remington, I apologize for my rudeness. It was unworthy of me. Olivia, despite her anger at the woman's earlier remarks, found herself responding to the genuine regret in her voice. It's forgotten, Miss Caldwell. With a final nod, Harriet departed, leaving a heavy silence in her wake. Elijah ran a hand through his hair, looking more shaken than Olivia had ever seen him. I'm sorry about that, he said finally. Harriet and it's complicated. She believed you were going to marry her, Olivia stated, not a question. He sighed. There was a time when that was the plan, yes. Before I married Rebecca. After Rebecca died, Harriet began corresponding with me again, offering comfort as families should. But over time, her letters began to suggest she saw a future for us. I thought I'd made it clear that wasn't possible, but perhaps I wasn't firm enough. You don't owe me an explanation, Olivia said, though part of her was hungry for any insight into his past. Your life before our arrangement is your own business. Is that what this is to you? An arrangement? His eyes searched hers, suddenly intent. The question caught her off guard. Isn't that what you intended? Protection for me and my child in exchange for bringing order to your accounts and household? Perhaps at first, he admitted. But these past weeks... He trailed off, seeming unable to find the right words. Olivia's heart beat faster. These past weeks... Elijah took a step closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. These past weeks have been the most peaceful I've known in years. Working with you, talking with you each evening, it's become more than an arrangement to me, Olivia. She scarcely dared breathe. What has it become, then? His hand rose, hesitating for a moment before gently touching her cheek. I don't know exactly, but I'd like to find out if you're willing. The baby chose that moment to kick vigorously, causing Olivia to gasp and place a hand on her belly. Elijah's eyes widened in concern. Are you all right? She laughed softly. Yes, just an active little one today. On impulse, she took his hand and placed it where the baby was moving. Feel. The wonder that spread across his face as he felt the child's movements was something Olivia knew she would remember forever. His calloused palm rested gently against the curve of her belly, and when the baby kicked again, a smile unlike any she'd seen before transformed his features. That's amazing, he whispered. It is, she agreed, suddenly overwhelmed with emotion. This man who had married her out of kindness now looked at her unborn child with genuine awe, a child that wasn't his by blood, but that he seemed increasingly ready to claim as his own. The moment stretched between them, intimate and charged with possibility. Then Elijah seemed to remember himself and reluctantly withdrew his hand. I should let you rest, he said, though he made no move to leave. The doctor said you shouldn't overexert yourself. Dr. Mackenzie, the physician from the nearest proper town, had been summoned to the ranch shortly after Olivia's arrival to assess her condition. He had pronounced both mother and child healthy, but advised rest and proper nutrition in the final months of pregnancy. I'm not tired, Olivia assured him. Though I am curious about something Harriet said. Wariness returned to his expression. What's that? She mentioned Boston. "Were you from there originally?" He nodded, seeming relieved that the question wasn't more personal. "Yes, born and raised. My father was in shipping, quite successful, until a series of bad investments left us nearly ruined. He died when I was 20, and I spent the next few years trying to rebuild what he'd lost." "Is that how you met Rebecca?" "Yes. Her father was a business associate who saw potential in me despite our reduced circumstances. Rebecca was." He smiled sadly. "She was sunshine, always laughing, always finding the bright side of any situation. We married young, both of us full of dreams." Olivia could hear the genuine affection in his voice. "She sounds wonderful." She was. When her father died, we decided to use her inheritance to start fresh out west. The railroad was expanding, cattle prices were high, and land was available for those willing to work it. Rebecca loved the idea of adventure, at least in theory. But the reality was harder, Olivia guessed. Elijah nodded. The isolation was difficult for her. She'd grown up surrounded by society, with friends and family always visiting. Out here, the nearest neighbors were miles away and the work never ended. But she tried, God knows she tried. "The gardens," Olivia said softly, remembering Mrs. Winter's comment. "Yes, her little piece of civilization in the wilderness," she called it. His expression grew distant. "When she told me she was expecting, I promised I'd make things easier, hire more help, maybe build a bigger house with more comforts. She was so happy about the baby, already planning the nursery." He fell silent, and Olivia didn't press. The pain of his loss was still evident, even years later. "I'm sorry," she said simply. Elijah refocused on her, his expression softening. "Life has a way of taking unexpected turns. I never imagined I'd marry again, let alone find myself in a situation like ours. But I'm grateful for whatever twist of fate brought you here, Olivia." The sincerity in his voice made her heart flutter. "As am I," she admitted. Later that evening, after a quiet dinner where neither mentioned Harriet's visit again, Elijah escorted Olivia to the foot of the stairs as had become their custom. This time, however, he hesitated. "Would you walk with me in the gardens tomorrow morning?" he asked. "There's something I'd like to show you." "Of course," she agreed, curious. He smiled, relief evident in his expression. "Good. After breakfast, then." That night, as Olivia prepared for bed, she found herself thinking about the life growing within her and the man who had unexpectedly become her protector. Whatever lay ahead, she was no longer alone in facing it. The thought brought a peace she hadn't felt since before her father's illness, and she slept more soundly than she had in months. The December morning dawned clear and cold, the frost creating intricate patterns on Olivia's bedroom window. She dressed warmly in one of the wool dresses Elijah had ordered from a catalog, after declaring Rebecca's old clothes insufficient for the Wyoming winter. The new garments had arrived the previous week, along with boots, shawls, and even a few items for the baby, a generosity that had moved Olivia to tears. After breakfast, Elijah led her outside, helping her navigate the steps with a supportive hand at her elbow. The gardens were dormant now, the flower beds covered with straw for protection against the winter cold, but Olivia could imagine how beautiful they must be in spring and summer. Rebecca planted something different in each section, Elijah explained as they walked slowly along the gravel paths. "Roses there, wildflowers here, herbs for the kitchen in that raised bed." She had a plan for expanding further, but he trailed off. "Perhaps we could continue her work in the spring," Olivia suggested gently. He looked at her with surprise that melted into gratitude. "I'd like that." They continued walking until they reached a large oak tree at the edge of the garden. Beneath it stood a small, simple marker of white marble. Olivia realized with a pang that this must be where Rebecca and her infant son were buried. Elijah stood silently before the grave, his expression solemn. "I wanted you to see this," he said finally, "to understand why I've been cautious in our relationship." Olivia waited, sensing there was more he needed to say. "When Rebecca died, I swore I'd never put another woman at risk the way she was. The doctor said it was just bad luck. Childbed fever can strike anyone, but I blamed myself for bringing her to this remote place, far from proper medical care." He took a deep breath. "That's why I've been insistent on Dr. Mackenzie visiting regularly, why I've been so concerned about your health. I couldn't bear to lose another wife that way." The raw honesty in his voice moved her deeply. "Elijah, what happened to Rebecca wasn't your fault. And my situation is different. Dr. Mackenzie says I'm healthy, the baby is positioned well, and Mrs. Winters has assisted at dozens of births." "I know that logically," he acknowledged, "but fear isn't always logical." Olivia reached for his hand, twining her fingers with his. "No, it isn't. I'm too afraid of the pain, afraid of failing as a mother, afraid this child will grow up feeling unwanted because of the circumstances of his birth." Elijah squeezed her hand. "No child of yours could ever feel unwanted, not with you as their mother. And no child raised in your home would lack for anything," she countered. "You've already shown more care for this baby than its own father ever did." They stood together in the winter sunlight, hands joined, a moment of perfect understanding passing between them. Then Elijah turned to face her fully. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice low and serious, "about our arrangement, as you called it." Olivia's heart skipped. "Oh, I think we should consider making it more than an arrangement, a real marriage in every sense." His eyes searched hers. "Not right away after the baby comes, when you're fully recovered, if that's something you might want." The offer took her breath away. "Are you certain? This child isn't yours, but it could be," he interrupted. "In every way that matters, and perhaps in time we might have others." His expression grew tender. "I've come to care for you, Olivia, more than I expected, more than I thought possible after Rebecca. If you don't feel the same, I'll understand and never mention it again. Our current arrangement can continue indefinitely." Olivia felt tears gathering in her eyes. "I do feel the same," she admitted softly. "I've tried not to, knowing this marriage began as a practical solution to my problems. But you've shown me such kindness, such respect. How could I not come to care for you?" The smile that spread across his face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. Without a word, he drew her gently into his arms, mindful of her belly between them, and lowered his lips to hers in a kiss that spoke of promise and possibility. When they parted, Olivia felt light-headed with happiness. "So we'll try," she said. "A real marriage." "Yes," he agreed, "one step at a time." As they walked back to the house, arm in arm, Olivia felt the baby move within her, a gentle reminder of the future that awaited them. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Christmas at Double R Ranch brought a festivity Olivia hadn't expected. The house was decorated with pine boughs and red ribbons, and Mrs. Winters outdid herself preparing traditional dishes. Elijah surprised Olivia with gifts: a silver hairbrush set, books she had mentioned wanting to read, and a handcrafted cradle for the baby, made by his own hands in the evenings after she'd gone to bed. "It's beautiful," she whispered, running her fingers over the smooth wood. "When did you find time?" he smiled, pleased by her reaction. "There's always time for important things." The new year approached, bringing with it the knowledge that Olivia's time was drawing near. Dr. Mackenzie visited after Christmas, pronounced everything progressing well, and promised to return in mid-January when the baby was expected. "Just to be safe, I'll try to stay in the area," he told Elijah. "First babies often come late, but it's best to be prepared." January arrived with bitter cold and heavy snow, effectively isolating the ranch from town. Olivia found herself increasingly uncomfortable as the baby dropped lower, making walking difficult and sleep nearly impossible. Elijah was attentive to her every need, reading to her in the evenings when she was too tired to hold a book herself, massaging her swollen ankles, and ensuring the nursery they had prepared was ready with everything the baby might need. On the morning of January 15th, Olivia woke to a sharp pain across her lower back. By midday, there was no denying that her labor had begun. Mrs. Winters took charge immediately, sending a ranch hand to fetch Dr. Mackenzie and preparing the bedroom with practiced efficiency. "First babies take their time," she assured Olivia as she helped her change into a clean nightgown. "The doctor will be here long before anything serious happens. But babies follow no schedule but their own." By mid-afternoon, Olivia's pains were coming regularly and with increasing intensity. The ranch hand returned with news that the doctor was detained by another birth in town and would come as soon as possible. "We'll manage," Mrs. Winters declared confidently. "I've brought more babies into this world than I can count. You just focus on your breathing, Mrs. Remington." Outside the bedroom door, Elijah paced like a caged animal, flinching at each muffled cry from within. When a particularly sharp scream pierced the air, he could stand it no longer and burst into the room, ignoring Mrs. Winters' protests. "Olivia," he said, moving to her side and taking her hand. "I'm here." She gripped his fingers with surprising strength as another contraction seized her. "It hurts," she gasped when it passed, "more than I expected." "You're doing wonderfully," he assured her, brushing damp hair from her forehead, "and you're the strongest woman I know." Mrs. Winters watched them with narrowed eyes. "Mr. Remington, it's not proper for you to be here." "Proper be damned," he replied without looking at her. "I'm not leaving my wife," and he didn't. Throughout the long hours that followed, Elijah remained at Olivia's side, supporting her through each contraction, offering water and encouragement, his own fear carefully concealed behind a mask of calm confidence. As evening turned to night with still no sign of the doctor, Mrs. Winters determined it was time. "The baby's coming now, ready or not," she announced. "Mr. Remington, you can stay if you must, but keep out of my way and do exactly as I say." Elijah nodded, moving to support Olivia from behind as Mrs. Winters directed. The next hour was a blur of pain and effort for Olivia, punctuated by Mrs. Winters' firm instructions and Elijah's steady presence at her back. And then, suddenly, it was over. A lusty cry filled the room as Mrs. Winters lifted a squirming, red-faced infant. "A girl," she announced with satisfaction. "A perfect little girl." Elijah's arms tightened around Olivia as they both stared in wonder at the tiny being Mrs. Winters was expertly cleaning and wrapping. When the housekeeper placed the swaddled infant in Olivia's arms, a sob of joy escaped her. "She's beautiful," she whispered, counting fingers and toes with reverent care. "Like her mother," Elijah said, his voice thick with emotion. He reached out a tentative finger to touch the baby's cheek. "Hello, little one." The child turned toward his touch, her cries quieting at the sound of his voice. Olivia looked up at him, her heart so full she thought it might burst. "Would you like to hold your daughter?" His eyes widened at the word your, but he nodded, carefully accepting the tiny bundle. As he cradled the infant against his chest, his expression was one of pure awe. "What shall we call her?" Olivia had been considering names for months but had never quite settled on one. Now, watching Elijah hold her child with such tenderness, she knew. "Rebecca," she said softly. "Rebecca Grace Remington." Elijah's eyes filled with tears. "Are you sure?" "I am. It feels right." She reached up to touch his face. A new beginning, connected to the past but looking toward the future. He leaned down to kiss her, gentle and reverent. "Thank you," he whispered against her lips. Mrs. Winters cleared her throat, reminding them of her presence. "I'll just go prepare some tea," she said, a suspicious brightness in her own eyes. "Mr. Remington, You make sure Mrs. Remington and the baby rest. Doctor will still want to check them both when he arrives." Left alone with their newborn daughter, Elijah and Olivia shared a moment of profound peace. Whatever had brought them together, chance, fate, or simple human kindness, had led to this perfect moment. "I love you," Elijah said suddenly, the words seeming to surprise him as much as they did Olivia. "I should have said it before now, but I do. I love you, Olivia Remington." Tears of joy spilled down her cheeks. "And I love you, Elijah Remington, with all my heart." Little Rebecca made a small sound of contentment, as if approving of her parents' declaration. Elijah laughed softly, placing the baby back in Olivia's arms. "I think she agrees this is as it should be." "A family," Olivia murmured, looking down at her daughter's perfect face. "Our family." The word had never sounded sweeter. Spring came early that year, bringing new growth to the gardens of Double R Ranch. Elijah and Olivia worked side by side, planting the seeds Rebecca had ordered before her death alongside new varieties they had chosen together. 3-month-old Rebecca Grace, already called Gracie by everyone on the ranch, watched from a basket nearby, cooing at butterflies and reaching for sunbeams. "She has your smile," Elijah observed, pausing in his digging to watch as Olivia tickled the baby's chin, eliciting a gummy grin. "And your eyes," Olivia replied. "Mrs. Winters says they'll likely stay blue." He shook his head in wonder. "It doesn't seem possible that she's mine in every way but blood. I couldn't love her more if she were." "You're the only father she'll ever know," Olivia said softly. "And the best one she could have." Their marriage had indeed become real in every sense after Gracie's birth. Once Olivia had fully recovered, they had moved into the master bedroom together, discovering a passion and tenderness neither had expected. Their nights were filled with whispered conversations and loving touches, building a bond that grew stronger with each passing day. The ranch prospered under their joint management. Olivia's head for business complemented Elijah's practical knowledge, and together they expanded operations to include breeding horses, a venture that was already showing promise of significant returns. As May turned to June, they received an unexpected letter bearing a Boston postmark. Harriet Caldwell wrote to announce her engagement to a prominent banker and to offer belated congratulations on the birth of their daughter, news of which had reached her through mutual acquaintances. "That's generous of her," Olivia remarked as they sat on the porch after dinner, Gracie sleeping peacefully in her father's arms. Elijah nodded. "Harriet was always kind at heart despite her forceful personality. I'm glad she's found happiness." "As have we," Olivia said, leaning against his shoulder and gazing out at the land that had become truly home. In the distance, cattle grazed on green pastures, and the mountains stood purple against the evening sky. "I never imagined, that day in town when everyone turned against me, that such joy could come from such shame." "There was never any shame in you," Elijah said firmly, "only in how they treated you." She smiled up at him. "My knight in dusty boots riding to my rescue." "Best impulsive decision I ever made," he chuckled, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Marrying you in the street for all to see." "You know what tomorrow is?" Olivia asked, a secret smile playing at her lips. He thought for a moment. "June 15th. Is it significant?" 1 year ago tomorrow, a certain cattle baron caused quite a scandal by proposing to a disgraced woman in the middle of Redemption Springs. Elijah's eyes widened. "Has it been a year already?" "It has," she confirmed. "And I was thinking we might take a trip into town." "I believe we're overdue for a visit." A slow smile spread across his face. "Are you sure? The last time you were there wasn't exactly pleasant, I'm sure. I want them to see what became of the woman they shamed and the man who saw her worth when no one else would." She touched Gracie's soft cheek. "I want them to see our family." The next day, the Remingtons rode into Redemption Springs in their finest carriage. Olivia in a stylish blue dress that emphasized her now slender figure. Elijah in a well-cut suit rather than his usual ranch clothes, and little Gracie in a christening gown of delicate white lace. They made quite the picture of prosperity and happiness as they stepped down before the general store. The town had changed little in the year since Olivia's humiliation. Mr. Watkins still ran the store, Mrs. Peterson still led the Ladies' Aid Society, and Sheriff Miller still maintained a pretense of law and order. All activity paused as the Remington family made their appearance, recognition and surprise rippling through the gathered townsfolk. "Mrs. Remington, Mr. Watkins said, hurrying forward with a deference that bordered on obsequiousness. "What an unexpected pleasure. How may I assist you today?" "Good morning, Mr. Watkins," Olivia replied pleasantly. "We're in need of several items. Perhaps you could prepare them while my husband and I take a stroll with our daughter. It's her first visit to town." Of course," he agreed eagerly, clearly mindful of Elijah's substantial business. "Just leave your list, and I'll have everything ready when you return." As they walked through town, Olivia held her head high, acknowledging former acquaintances with a polite nod but stopping to speak with none. She could feel the stares, hear the whispers, but they held no power over her now. Elijah walked beside her, one hand protectively at the small of her back, the other supporting Gracie, who was perched contentedly on his arm. They reached the town square, the very spot where they had exchanged their vows a year earlier. Olivia paused, looking around at the place that had once been the scene of her greatest humiliation. "Any regrets?" Elijah asked quietly, reading her thoughts as he so often did now. She smiled up at him, her heart full of the love they had built together. "Not one. You." "Only that I didn't meet you sooner," he replied, leaning down to kiss her lightly, unmindful of the watching townspeople. Gracie chose that moment to let out a happy gurgle, reaching for her mother with pudgy hands. Olivia took her from Elijah, settling the baby on her hip with practiced ease. "I think someone's hungry," she laughed. "Shall we head back to the store?" As they turned, they found themselves face to face with Reverend Parker, who had performed their hasty ceremony a year before. He removed his hat, looking somewhat abashed. "Mr. and Mrs. Remington," he greeted them. "And this must be the little one I've heard about. She's a beauty." "Thank you, Reverend," Olivia replied cordially. "This is Rebecca Grace, though we call her Gracie." "A fine name," he said, then hesitated before continuing. "I feel I owe you an apology, Mrs. Remington. My behavior last year was less than charitable. I should have offered Christian compassion rather than judgment." The unexpected apology touched Olivia deeply. "Thank you, Reverend. That means a great deal. Would you consider attending services while you're in town?" he asked hopefully. The congregation would benefit from seeing such a fine example of family devotion. Elijah exchanged a glance with Olivia, who nodded slightly. "We'd be honored," he told the Reverend. "Though we'll need to return to the ranch afterward. I have a new foal that requires attention." The news spread quickly through town that the Remingtons would be attending Sunday service. By the time they arrived at the church 2 days later, it seemed the entire population of Redemption Springs had turned out to witness the event. As they entered, the whispers that followed them were no longer accusations of shame but murmurs of admiration for Elijah's prosperity, for Olivia's evident happiness, for the beautiful child they presented for blessing. The same people who had once shunned Olivia now competed for the chance to greet her, to compliment her daughter, to extend invitations that would likely never be accepted. After the service, as they prepared to depart, Mrs. Peterson approached, her expression carefully composed. "Mrs. Remington, I must say your daughter is a credit to you both." "Thank you," Olivia replied simply. "I wonder," the older woman continued, if you might consider joining Our Lady's Aid Society. We do important work for the less fortunate, and someone with your experience would bring valuable perspective. Olivia regarded her steadily, remembering how this same woman had predicted Elijah would tire of his charity case within 6 months. That's kind of you to offer, Mrs. Peterson, but my duties at the ranch keep me fully occupied. Perhaps another time. The polite rejection was delivered with such grace that Mrs. Peterson could find no grounds for offense, though her smile tightened noticeably. As they drove away from Redemption Springs, Elijah reached over to take Olivia's hand. You handled that beautifully, he said. Though I wouldn't have blamed you for being less forgiving. What would be the point? She asked, watching Gracie sleep peacefully in her basket. They have no power over me anymore, over us. Their approval or disapproval means nothing compared to what we've built together. He squeezed her hand. You're an extraordinary woman, Olivia Remington. And you, she replied with a smile that held all the love in her heart, are the best man I've ever known. Taking a chance on a disgraced woman, marrying her in the street for all to see, who does such a thing? A man who recognized the treasure others were too blind to value, he answered simply. And who thanks God every day for the gift of you. As they crested the hill that would take them home to Double R Ranch, Olivia looked back once at the town growing smaller in the distance. What had once been a place of pain was now merely a point on the map, insignificant compared to the journey that lay ahead, a journey she and Elijah would travel together, with little Gracie and perhaps other children to follow, building a legacy of love from what had begun in the most unlikely of circumstances. The shame that had once defined her was now just a memory, replaced by the joy of being truly seen, truly known, and truly loved. And that, Olivia reflected as she turned her gaze toward home, was worth every moment of the path that had brought her here.